All right, we got ESPN's Jordan Reid here on the Minnesota Vikings Podcast. If you are new to the Minnesota Vikings Podcast, you can listen every week on Vikings.com and wherever you stream your audio podcast. Jay Reid, the NFL Draft just passed. You and I talked about 2 or 3 times, one at the Combine, one a week before the draft, and now this is our first time talking since the Vikings made the 7 selections in the 2024 NFL Draft. When you look at just the J.J. McCarthys of the world and the Dallas Turners of the world and some of your projections that you, I guess, had in place when starting the offseason mock draft period, how do you feel about this Vikings new look team with those 2 guys being drafted in the first round?
Well, Gabe, I don't know if you remember this, and I remember it very clearly when you guys were asking everybody who the Vikings could potentially take back when they only had the 11th overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
My pick was Dallas Turner. You can roll back the tape,
Yep.
YouTube, audio,
Yep.
whatever. Dallas Turner was my pick back when they only had that one first-round pick at number 11 overall. So I'm really happy to see that they targeted the player that I thought was a really good fit for them. And Dallas Turner, I thought he was the best defensive player in the draft. I was very shocked that he lasted all the way until the number 17 overall pick, which
Mm-hmm.
they traded up for to get him. I thought he was one of the best overall defensive players in this year's class. And I mean, he's a perfect fit for Brian Flores' defense. He's going to be that chess piece. And they already signed 2 big guys in free agency with Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel, which is going to allow Dallas Turner to obviously mature very slowly, but it allows them to move him all over the place too, just because you have those 2 veteran defensive ends that are going to be in your starting lineup. But I mean, the headliner is J.J. McCarthy, and I thought it was the worst kept secret that if there was one situation that you could place him in any quarterback in this draft, and if you polled all these guys, the one situation where they would want to go into the league was Minnesota, just because you have so many weapons with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, the list goes on and on as far as the infrastructure that they have in place. So I thought it made a lot of sense for JJ to land in Minnesota just
Mm-hmm.
because he's not going to be forced to play right away. They have Sam Darnold, Nick Mullins ahead of him already as well. So I really like what they were able to do, not only in the first round, but also getting Kyrie Jackson on day 2. Day 3. I thought that was a really good pick for them. And then also getting some development of players like a Walter Rouse
Yeah.
out of Oklahoma, Michael Juergens at center. We know they have some questions behind Garrett Bradbury in the starting lineup, and then the interior offensive line behind Blake Brandel and then also Ed Ingram as well. So I really like how the class was able to come together as a whole.
I love that. You did talk about Dallas Turner being your guy earlier in the draft process when saying if the Vikings do stay at 11, Dallas Turner will be the guy. I do remember right before the draft, I said, what would be an aggressive draft for this Minnesota Vikings team versus conservative? And you said, well, aggressive would be them moving up to the 3rd or 4th overall selection to get the quarterback of the future, and the conservative would be moving back. Well, they acquired the 23rd overall selection via trade, and they only moved up 1 spot to the 10th overall pick to get J.J. McCarthy. Then they traded the 23rd overall selection to 17 to get Dallas Turner. Would you call that aggressive, conservative, same? Like, what are your thoughts on that now that you've seen how the Vikings, acquired their picks in the first round?
Well, the position everybody thought that they were going to be aggressive about going up to get was the quarterback, when in the end it was the defensive player in Dallas Turner. So I thought that was a bit of a ironic, I would say, as far as how it all unfolded with that. But I love the approach. Everybody knew that they had to come out of this draft somehow, some way with a young quarterback. Now that Kirk Cousins is gone to Atlanta, they didn't have that young piece in place that they could build around in the future behind Sam Darnold and then also Nick Mullins. So J.J. McCarthy, I think the best outcome for the Vikings was that they didn't have to give up that first round pick for next year,
Yeah.
which was a big debate. There were some people that were comfortable with doing that, while there were some other people on the other side of the fence that were not comfortable doing that. So I love the patience that Kwesi was able to show. He didn't overreact. And even though I think that Michael Penix's pick at number 8 to the Falcons threw everybody for a loop, including
Yeah.
himself, that's why he wanted to go up and get J.J. McCarthy at 10. But I love that they didn't have to trade up to 3 or 4 to give up a future draft capital, especially that first round pick next year.
I love that. I'm just thinking of just the value that the Vikings were able to, how much value the Vikings were able to get in this draft. And you mentioned a guy in Kyrie Jackson. When you look at his tape and you see his story, what were some things that stood out to you when it came to him being a Minnesota Viking now for this team?
Well, the thing that I love the most about Kyrie, and I had an opportunity to sit down and meet with him after a couple of practices at the Senior Bowl, and I thought he performed really well there, was just he was just so thankful for
Mm,
being there. And if you don't really know his story, look it up. It's one of the best of any prospect in this entire draft. I mean, somebody that was working at a grocery store, Chipotle, you name it,
yeah.
as far as the jobs that he had. So just his perseverance and him being in the situation that he's in today, you know you're going to get somebody that's going to take advantage of the opportunity that is given. And I love those players, especially those day three guys that come through the door hungry. But what I love and what I tell you all the time with defensive backs is that half the battle of being successful in the NFL is confidence.
Mm,
And we both have already met Kyrie.
yeah.
Confidence is something that he does not lack at all. So he's already going to have that walking through the door. And even though things didn't work out for him at Alabama, once again, he persevered at Oregon. He started at the top of the depth chart, and then he was able to keep his spot, but also he was able to break out and have a great season last year as well. So I love the perseverance. I love the confidence, and he's a great fit. And Brian Flores, the
Yeah.
scheme, he's talking about a 6'3" corner that can
Mm,
run. He's rangy. He has really good ball skills, and the Vikings are really starting to collect some young cornerbacks. So it really would not be surprising if he finds his way into playing significant snaps, whether it's on special teams or even at corner this year. I really like a lot of the young corners that they have been able to collect, whether it's a Mekhi Blackman, a Caleb Evans. Now you throw Kyrie into that mix.
mhm.
I really think they have a really good young nucleus at corner.
And you mentioned Alabama. Adding on top of that, this is a team where Kyrie Jackson gets to play with two of his former teammates in college, in Dallas Turner and Will Reichert. So having that connection, I mean, you know about this when you go to college or you go to a different team, you're always looking for something that you can kind of latch on to. So the fact that he has two former teammates, I'm sure that is going to bode well for him. But now that OTA's phase 2 is in full effect now, I mean, you start to see some of these young guys mix in with some of these veterans. For these young guys, like, how do you define success when it comes to, like being on the field with some of these guys that are 30 and 35 years in age, and you're just trying to, get your footing as far as playing in the NFL?
Well, I think the first one is just understand your role. There's going to be some guys that have different roles, whether it's JJ or Dallas or
Yeah.
whoever. Just understand what your initial role is going to be, and then just slow play everything. These coaches, they're going to try to throw everything at you, whether it's the playbook, different schemes that they're going to be doing, some different roles that they're going to be asked to do, and understand that you're going to have to face some adversity.
Hmm.
I mean, Harrison Smith is probably going to pick off JJ McCarthy one of these days in
Yeah.
practice, but what they're going to be looking for is how do you bounce back from it? And then also, let's just make sure that we're learning from those mistakes as well, just because that's what these mini camps, these OTAs, these practices, that's what they're for. Just because if I'm JJ McCarthy, just speaking from a quarterback standpoint, what am I comfortable with in the
Hmm.
playbook? And then what do I need help with? Just so I know what to work on when I'm moving forward. And then also, sitting down with KOC and Quasi and these Wes Phillips and all these other offensive coaches, how can they help me get more
Hmm.
comfortable in these parts of the playbook? And then also the footwork. That's a big thing that's not really talked about a lot with JJ, and something that he really struggled with during his time in Michigan. There's going to be footwork tied to every single passing concept
Hmm.
that is in the playbook now. So just understanding those details and the nuances of everything that's going to be asked of them, and then just weathering and fighting through that adversity that they're going to face.
How important do you think it is, or beneficial that you think it is, that J.J. McCarthy gets to learn from three guys that all got starting quarterback reps in this quarterback room for this Minnesota Vikings team last year?
Well, it's huge. And I'll just speak on Sam Darnold's behalf, just because he was once in a very similar situation
Hmm.
to JJ McCarthy, being a highly drafted first round pick. So he understands what JJ is going through. Now, the situations are a lot different. I think it's more advantageous for JJ just because of the infrastructure that's in place as opposed to what Sam went through during his time
Hmm.
with the Jets. But why I think the personalities are going to mesh so well with each other is that, once again, Sam's not a super old guy. I believe he's going to be 27 years old.
Yeah.
So he understands what's at stake, but also he's walked in the shoes of what JJ is going to go through already. And then also he's had experience in the type of playbook that JJ is going to go through as well. And then also Sam can share some experiences that he went through
Hmm.
during his early stages as well, whether it's adversity, positive moments, some things that he learned from during his time as a rookie quarterback or just a young quarterback in general as well. So I really like the quarterback room that they
Yeah.
have put in place, but also Sam Darnold's awareness of being able to share his prior experiences with JJ as well.
That's a really good point. And I believe, whenever someone is drafted in the first round, fan expectations is, okay, this guy has to play immediately. So for J.J. McCarthy to have 3 guys to learn from and not rush that process, I do think that makes his process, a little bit better, and it makes him not, I guess, put as much pressure on himself. But for a guy in Dallas Turner, right, that you bring him in, you already have brought in 2 outside linebackers in free agency with Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard. Like, how do you see Dallas Turner fitting in and ultimately getting some immediate snaps if that's what Brian Flores decides to do with him?
Well, the great thing for Dallas is that he's not going to have to start early on. And I know that may disappoint some fans, but it's really a good thing to me, just because a lot of times when rookies are rushed out there too early, and I'm not just speaking from a quarterback standpoint, but just in general, they get overwhelmed a lot just because you're adjusting to the speed of the game, but also you want to make sure you're in the right positions, excuse me, from a playbook standpoint as well. So not only are you trying to get over the avalanche of information that's being thrown at you from a game speed standpoint, but also you're adjusting to a new scheme as well. So there's a lot of hurdles that you're trying to get over during your early on game action. And then there's some rookies that don't even get comfortable in the scheme until later on in the season or even going into their second year. So for Dallas, him essentially being a relief pitcher is what I like to call it early on, behind Andrew Van Ginkel and then also Jonathan Grenard. Maybe we can focus on him being a bit of a changeup in the lineup and playing him on third downs, dropping him in coverage some of these times, and even playing him inside. And what I like to call those NASCAR packages on third down, of where we just get a bunch of speed in our 4-down defensive front. So I think he's in a really good situation of where we can take advantage of his athletic gifts early on, and we really don't have to rush him into action.
Love it, man. Lastly, my final question is, when you look at just this Vikings roster right now on paper, what are some other missing pieces, or what are some other positions that the Vikings can address via free agency, or, once, the 53-man rosters across the league start to be constructed and some of those veterans start to become available for other teams to pick up? What are some of those positions that you think the Vikings can address?
There's 2 that make a lot of sense to me, and it's on the interior of both offensive and defensive line. I would like to see them add another guard to get some competition with Blake Brandel, whether that's bringing Dalton Risner back or signing a street free agent somewhere, just because Brandel basically is an unproven guy right now. So I would like to see them bring in a free agent guard, whether it's bringing Risner back or some other player off of the streets in free agency. So guard definitely is one. And then also interior defensive tackle or defensive line, I should say. I think they're a bit thin there. And I know they drafted Levi Drake Rodriguez in the 7th round, but I don't think he's a player that you can count on, especially early on in his rookie season, just because we have to remember that he is a late day 3 draft prospect. I think that would just be unfair to him, counting on him to play significant snaps early on. So bring somebody along the interior defensive line. I think that's another position that they should look to add in free agency.
Look, it's a fun time here in Minnesota. I know I always bring this up. You are a Vikings fan from afar. You follow this team closely, so it's always great having you on, and I'm looking forward to having you on before the season starts to give your thoughts on where the Vikings currently stand at that point. We know this is a process from combine to week 1, so it's been great talking to you and looking forward to having you on again, Jay Reid.
Absolutely. Thanks as always, Gabe.